the 2017 Harvard Just Food Forum on labor across the food system. I'm Stephen Gonzalez. I'm a third-year law student here and the current president of the Harvard Food Law Society. This is our third year organizing this forum. We're very excited for the topic this year. Each year, we highlight one aspect of our evolving food system on which we can reflect and discuss how to make it more just. This year, we're focused on one of the most personal aspects of the food we eat, the voices and concerns of those who help to grow, prepare, and distribute it. We feel very privileged by the variety of stakeholders who've agreed to come today and share their stories with us. And we challenge everyone here to engage with these issues and with each other, to meet new people, and to learn from the amazing students, organizers, farmers, workers, and scholars, and many more who have agreed to attend and present today. So from the Harvard Food Literacy Project and the Harvard Food Law Society, welcome everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa. I'm the Vice President of the Food Law Society. And to give you a little background on us, the Food Law Society here at Harvard Law School seeks to foster on-campus dialogue on numerous issues in law, policy, science, and management that confront professionals in the field of food law and policy. Members participate in clinical projects and conferences, such as this one, host speakers, take trips, and collaborate with other groups across the university. And we generally just want to engage with food issues and create dialogues like this one. The Food Literacy Project cultivates an understanding of food from the ground up. Education focuses on four integrated areas of food in society: sustainability, nutrition, food prep, and community. FLP hosts a fellowship program for students, Keynote, as well as guides several campus-wide initiatives which provide opportunities to explore the food system experientially and academically. Since we're up here, we also want to take this opportunity to say a few thank yous. First, thank you to you all for joining us on this Saturday in spite of this horrific weather. We all know that everyone's very busy and we really value your time and taking the time on your Saturday to discuss this very important topic. We also want to thank our sponsors and food donors. You'll notice some exciting, we have coffee from Equal Exchange. We'll have some food items donated from local vendors in the area. And this is the third year that Equal Exchange has provided coffee, so we're very, very appreciative for that. And we also want to extend a warm welcome to our presenters and speakers. Thank you for coming out here. And last but not least, thank you to the Food Law and Policy Clinic for the continued wisdom and guidance. And last but not least, thank you to Christina Rice for all of her hard work in putting this conference together. Seriously, Christina, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Smith. I'm the conference chair for the Food Law Society this year. I just have a couple quick housekeeping notes before I introduce Emily Broadley, who will speak for a few minutes before our keynote. I ask that everyone please put cell phones on silent and refrain from using them during the talks and panels so that we can give our wonderful speakers our undivided attention. We do have a full schedule today, so please try to be in rooms as close to the start time listed on your schedule as possible. Given that we are running a little bit behind, that may be adjusted a little bit. If you do have any questions throughout the day, the organizers all have a food sticker on the name tag, so you can find one of us and ask. Also, a quick note, I know we did not have a coat rack set up when many of you came in. We do now have one. If you go to these doors to your left, close to the elevator, you'll find it there. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce Emily Broadley. Emily is an assistant clinical professor here at Harvard Law School and the founding director of the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, which is housed within the Center for Health Law and Policy Innovation. The clinic is the first law school clinic in the nation devoted to providing legal and policy solutions to address the health, economic, and environmental challenges that face our food system. Emily teaches courses on this topic and focuses her scholarship and practice on finding solutions to today's biggest food system issues, such as increasing access to healthy foods, preventing diet-related disease, and eliminating food waste, among others. Emily is an indispensable resource for planning this conference every year, as well as in her role as director of the clinic. So with that, I'd like to welcome Emily.
spring day we all hope for, hence the lack of a coat rack. But thanks for braving the elements and making it out here. As you heard, I direct the Food Law and Policy Clinic, which is an action learning program here at Harvard Law School. And what that means is that we work with clients and communities. We do projects to try to kind of help people understand the law and make it better. And then we're educating students in class and in the clinic doing these projects and getting to work on these skills. So we work hand in hand with communities. We work in Mississippi, in Navajo Nation. We're doing projects here in Boston and in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, helping people to better understand the law. We also work on national level law reform projects. And I want to highlight a report we just recently released about why we need a national food strategy for the U.S. And we talk a little bit about how all of these issues, like the issues of labor that we're going to talk about today, are treated all as siloed different areas: labor, the environment, health, food access, but actually they all have a lot of nexus together, and if we kind of consider them strategically and holistically, we could have a lot better outcomes. So the past few years, we've held food justice conferences here, and the goal is really to break down the kind of academic and community divide in talking about some of the biggest issues facing our society through the lens of food and food justice. So before I talk a little bit about the goals for today's conference, I want to also thank, again, the organizers of the conference who have done an amazing job. So you just heard from the three students that are the leads of the Food Law Society, Lisa, Olivia, and Stephen, who have done an amazing job, and Carolyn from the Food Literacy Project. And I want to reiterate the thanks to Christina Rice and also Alyssa Chan, who are staff in the Food Law and Policy Clinic and have been working really hard alongside the students and alongside the Food Literacy Project. And I'm really appreciative because I've actually, even though I direct the program, haven't really been that involved this year. So I'm happy to see it all come together. I can't wait to hear the speakers today. So the past few years, our conference focused on food justice. And just to say a little bit about what food justice means, to me, it really means a food system that offers all individuals and communities an opportunity to benefit equally from the food system and not be burdened disproportionately. And this is really where this breaks down right now. There are certain populations that really benefit from food that's cheap and available, and there's a lot of people that don't benefit because they live in communities that are polluted, they suffer from acute environmental harms, or they're the people working in this food system who aren't paid a livable wage and aren't able to afford the food that they're helping to produce. So labor is a really central piece of this, and food system workers, as we'll hear more today, are some of the most marginalized people in this country. So by example, the median annual wage for food chain workers is $16,000, and the median hourly wage is $10. So compare that to across all industries, the median wage being over $36,000, and the median hourly wage being $17.50. So they're making a lot less money. And they also rely very heavily on our public assistance programs. 13% of food workers relied on SNAP, and that's about more than 2 times as much as workers in other industries. So it's basically a big subsidy to employers in the food system who are able to then charge their workers under the wage that they really need to survive. So it's really, I think, through this conference, we're trying to confront this, discuss this and confront this fact that the food system is really not working for the people who are producing food. It's also an area where there's increased issues of gender and racial inequality, which we'll hear about today. And then I also want to acknowledge the close link between the food system and our immigration issues, which I think are more prominent now than ever. So 20% of workers in the food system were not born in this country. We'll hear from some of them today. And many of those who produce our food are under attack, and especially those who are trying to stand up for their rights are being targeted, as are their allies. So I'm grateful to those that made it here today. I know it's a struggle right now to be speaking on these issues, and I think I hope you'll join me in really giving them a warm welcome and a thank you for making the trip here. In terms of what we'll hear today, there's going to be a lot of really exciting panels. We're going to talk about migrant farm worker experiences and the laws regulating the conditions in the fields, the dairy industry. We'll talk about workplace safety in slaughterhouses and hear about some of the systemic health and safety issues. and then innovative models in the restaurant industry for increasing wages. These are just a sampling of the kinds of things we're going to hear about. So I think it's going to be a really great day. The conference really is about moving all of us forward together, bringing diverse voices into this conversation. As I mentioned before, breaking down the academic and community divide so that we're working hand in hand on these issues. So I want to thank you again and challenge you to be really active participants, make relationships that we can kind of continue after this conference working together. And I want to also again thank our conference organizers and all of you. And I'm actually going to turn it back over to Lisa to kind of kick us off and introduce our first keynote. So thank you again.
Thanks, Emily. So I'm here to introduce Sheila Madali. I'm very excited. Sheila is the co-director of the Law and Organizing Department at Restaurant Opportunity Centered United, also known as ROC United. ROC United engages workers, employers, and consumers to improve wages and working conditions in the restaurant industry. ROC United is responsible for advancing the organization's work through an intricate balance of legal and organizing strategies. With over 12 million employers nationwide, the restaurant industry is one of the largest and fastest growing private sector employers in the nation, and ROC United engages workers, employers, and consumers to improve conditions for all people in this enormous industry. Sheila is also a leader in the Sanctuary Restaurant Project, which advocates for a zero tolerance policy against sexism, racism, and xenophobia, and to ensure that there is a place at the table for all. The project supports and brings together food businesses that provide a refuge from harassment based on immigration status, race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation. Sheila is also the daughter of South Asian immigrants and has been involved in the struggle for social and economic justice for over a decade in a variety of roles, ranging from street canvasser to legal counsel. Prior to working at ROC United, she practiced immigration law in Philadelphia and Mexico City and organized around immigrant detention, prison expansion, and sex worker and day laborer rights. Through her work, Sheila has been an advocate for justice in the restaurant industry, and we're so lucky to have her to speak with all of us today. With that, please join me in welcoming Sheila Madali.
To wake everyone up. Good morning, Cambridge. I'm going to try to start with a short video to wake everyone up.
So, do you eat ethically?
So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you in Cambridge, even though it's Saturday morning. It's really different to speak to non-restaurant workers because we would never be able to pull this off with industry folks. So I'm really excited to be here with you all, thinking about how we can collaborate between organizers, activists, workers, to fight for justice throughout the food chain. This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I grew up in New Jersey, the Garden State, working a series of restaurant and retail jobs when I was younger and spending all of my free time, strategizing about resistance and organizing for a more just world. And I was a committed vegan and, drove my family crazy, essentially, by going straight from work to meetings or protests on a regular basis, and meanwhile being completely oblivious to the organizing potential in the very industry in which I worked. And so I've been with Rock now for about 5 years, and I continue to learn every day still from our members and my colleagues. And it's safe to say that my life and relationship with food has definitely changed over the course of the last 5 years. So Rock, this is a haiku that was written by one of our members. Rock was formed in the aftermath of a tragedy. There was a restaurant on the 107th floor of Tower 2 of the World Trade Center. And when the 9/11 tragedy happened, 73 workers who were in the restaurant that morning for their shift to start lost their lives, either jumping to their deaths or essentially being evaporated when the building crumbled. And so the 250 workers who were not scheduled to work that morning lost their jobs and lost their coworkers. And in the aftermath of 9/11, a temporary little relief center was formed to support those surviving workers. And that temporary relief center was called the Restaurant Opportunity Center. And we've since grown to a national restaurant worker organization with over 18,000 worker members, hundreds of high road employer members, and thousands of consumer members. We have offices in New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, DC, Boston, LA, Seattle, the Bay Area, Chicago, New Orleans, and Detroit. And I might be forgetting someone, but hopefully not. And so our work at Rock, over the years, we've won some things. A big portion of our work is what we call workplace justice. And this is where we use a combination of organizing and litigation to kind of publicly demonstrate the consequences for bad employers. And we do this because we fundamentally believe that worker organizing is necessary for real and lasting social change. And so through our workplace justice work, we have won over a dozen workplace organizing campaigns, over $10 million in stolen wages and tips. And probably most interesting is that we've won really significant structural changes in high-profile restaurants. And so an example of this is Del Posto in New York. And so this is a clip from an article that was written about Del Posto. Del Posto was a high-profile restaurant in New York City owned by celebrity chef Mario Batali. And workers from Del Posto came to Rock with complaints about how they were being treated at work. So we supported the workers in filing litigation and an organizing strategy. So we had a lawsuit that alleged minimum wage and overtime violations, race and national origin discrimination, and tip misappropriation. And we also did weekly protests outside the restaurant and really made it a public scene and public awareness around how the workers in the restaurant were being treated. And so through this combination of litigation and organizing, we were able to have a successful resolution that included over $1 million in back wages for the workers, significant policy changes similar to what one might get through a union contract, but our industry is 0.01% unionized, so that is not really a possibility for us. But we were in this situation able to get for the workers policies like paid sick days, paid vacation time, a policy of promotion from within, cultural sensitivity training for management, And the restaurant actually joined our High Road Association. So High Road at Rock, the High Road is where we create the industry that we know is possible. And we do this through our High Road Employer Association, which is called RAISE, Restaurants Advancing Industry Standards and Equality. And so through RAISE, responsible employers are able to come together and share best practices for implementing pro-worker policies, and also work together to collectively raise industry standards. I was actually just in DC earlier this week with a lot of our RAISE employers kind of strategizing about how in this era we can resist and continue to push for proactive change and not just be responsive, and how the industry voice could be a little bit different than what we hear from the National Restaurant Association, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We also have 3 of our own restaurants called Colors in New York City, Detroit, and New Orleans, soon to be Oakland, California as well. And we also provide trainings to workers to advance to livable wage positions within the industry. So we provide curriculum in 45 hours of training in both, or in English as a second language, front of the house training, and fine dining bartending. And so the reason we do this is because there are some livable wage positions in the industry, but they tend to be concentrated in front of the house, and those positions tend to also be held by white workers. So by providing low-cost or free trainings to workers, we're trying to directly intervene and level the playing field so that we can make a dent in the segregation that exists throughout the restaurant industry. And in some areas, we actually partner with community colleges so that people who take our trainings are also able to get college credit. We do really in-depth participatory research where we document and capture the lived experiences of our members. So we've done over 30 in-depth reports on the restaurant industry, all of which are available online, many of which we have here with us today. And so these reports are used to directly inform our policy campaigns on a local, state, and federal level. And so, for example, we used our report on sexual harassment in the restaurant industry to shift to a gender justice focus for our One Fair Wage campaign. Because of the extreme prevalence that we see sexual harassment in our industry, we shifted the entire campaign based on this research and the lived experiences of our members. Similarly, in Philadelphia, where I'm based, we used our local industry report to identify areas where workers were having their rights violated that could be addressed through local legislation, because our state, Pennsylvania, is a little bit less friendly to workers on the statewide level. So we identified local initiatives like stricter wage theft enforcement, paid sick days on a local level, and a really innovative tip protection bill. Similarly, in New Orleans, we used our research on job insecurity in the restaurant industry to develop right to return legislation for workers who were displaced as the result of mandatory evacuations in the city of New Orleans. And there's many examples of this. I could go on, but that might probably be pretty boring. And the reason that we have been able to accomplish so much and grow so fast as an organization is really because of the explosive growth of the restaurant industry. The food system is the largest private sector employer, and the restaurant industry is half of all food system workers. So how many people here have worked in the restaurant industry? That looks about right. There are currently 12 million people employed in the restaurant industry in America, which means about 1 in 10 people in this country work in a restaurant. And if you consider past work experience, it's 1 in 2 people in this country have worked in a restaurant. And so we're the second largest and fastest growing sector of the economy. And so with over 1 million locations, restaurant locations throughout our country. And so although our industry is growing at exponential rates, and it is the second largest and fastest growing industry, it's also characterized by low wages and a lack of benefits. Every year, the Department of Labor puts out a shame list with the 10 lowest paying jobs in the country, and every year, the restaurant industry wins the award with 7 out of the 10 lowest paying jobs in the nation, and the 2 absolutely lowest paying jobs being in the restaurant industry. And so, currently, the restaurant industry, as a result of being such a large employer, is changing the face of our economy to a low-wage poverty economy. Currently, 1 in 3 working Americans live in poverty, and by 2020, Columbia economists anticipate that it will be half of all working Americans that live in poverty. And that growth is due almost exclusively to the growth of two industries, restaurants and retail. And so on top of really low wages, as if that was not enough, we see wage theft as being pervasive in the restaurant industry. Wage theft comes in kind of general, so we have traditional and non-traditional wage theft, which is really sad, that we need to differentiate. But traditional wage theft often comes in the form of non-payment, workers just not getting their checks, workers being paid less than the minimum wage, or in the case of tipped workers, employers not making up the difference between the tipped and regular minimum wage. So employers have the obligation to make up that difference if tips are not enough to bring the worker up to the minimum wage. But according to the Department of Labor, there's an 84% non-compliance rate within restaurants in the United States. We see workers regularly being shorted hours, so even if they are paid, they're not paid for the extent of all of their hours. Workers being forced to work off the clock, which often looks like workers will come into work and not being allowed to clock in immediately, or while they're working will be clocked out early. We see workers not being paid overtime for hours over 40 hours worked in a week. Illegal tip pools, so tip pools that include back of the house or management. And tip theft, where workers will go and put their money into the tip pool at the end of the night, and management will take a little bit off the top. And recently, to keep things more interesting for us, we've seen restaurant employers develop new innovative ways to steal from their workers. We have seen an increase in shifting non-tipped work onto tipped workers. And so, for example, tipped workers who are being paid the tipped hourly rate will be cooking or cleaning for that lower tipped wage. And the law on this is that if over 20% of your time is spent doing non-tipped work, you're supposed to be brought up to at least the regular overall minimum wage. We see heavy non-compliance with this area of law as well. Payroll cards. We've seen an increase in company-issued payroll cards in the restaurant industry that carry excessive fees. We've heard about this from workers at companies like Darden that issues a payroll card fee, and the workers have told us that there's excessive fees for point-of-sale purchases, withdrawals, replacement fees, replacement cards, balance inquiries. And then on top of that, when workers rely on ATMs exclusively to access their wages, they're not able to get smaller increments of money or kind of the entire increment of money if it's an uneven number. And so temp staffing agencies, we've seen increase in the restaurant industry, and so there's issues with temp staffing in both discrimination, but in the wage and hour lens, we've seen temp staffing companies charge clients a higher rate, including tips, and then actually just keep the extra and pay the workers just the minimum wage. And we've seen restaurants rotate workers between different branches of the same restaurant in efforts to try to skirt overtime regulations. And so, how is it that the restaurant industry gets away with proliferating the lowest paying jobs in our country? And so they get away with this through the political force of the National Restaurant Association. The National Restaurant Association is a highly powerful trade lobby organization comprised mostly of multi-billion-dollar companies like McDonald's, Darden, as I mentioned, parent company to Olive Garden, Capital Grill, Bahama Breeze, Seasons 52, many other brands, Yum Foods, parent company to KFC and Taco Bell. And so Darden is one of the top 10 most powerful lobbies in this country. And with their power and influence and money, they could choose an agenda of improving industry standards, improving community standards, but instead they have chosen an agenda of eroding the public health, worker and consumer protections, and the environment. And so, last week, or earlier this week, I keep saying last week, but it's just been a long week. Earlier this week, when I was in DC, and with our RAISE members and several of our worker leader members, the National Restaurant Association was also there. And this was on purpose. Every year when we go to the DC at the same time that the National Restaurant Association does their big lobby day, and we do this because our struggle is not just about economic, racial, and gender justice. It is also about who controls this country, corporations or people. And right now, a handful of companies control our food system and are working to maximize profit at the expense of the workers, consumers, high-road businesses, and the environment. And so, unfortunately, this is not a problem we can shop our way out of. And while personal choices about where and what we eat are extremely important, they are not enough because of the power the corporate restaurant industry, farm industry, all of these corporate entities have over our food system. And so for real justice in the food system entirely, we need a cohesive and intersectional movement that is committed to fighting and creating enough political power that we can change the policies that put corporations in charge of our food, our livelihoods, and our communities. The National Restaurant Association demonstrates their power by having an entirely different structure for wages in this industry. Since emancipation, the restaurant industry has fought to keep worker wages as low as possible by having workers paid via tips instead of a wage. And so the idea of tipping actually originated in the homes of feudal Europe. And rich Americans would go to Europe and come back kind of showing off their new aristocratic ways, which included the custom of tipping. But when they tried to bring the custom of tipping back to the United States, they were met with a massive anti-tipping movement that argued that a tipped wage system was both undemocratic and unfair. And so this anti-tipping movement moved to Europe and was successful, which is why tipped workers in Europe have a base wage and tips on top. However, here in the United States, two industries crushed the anti-tipping movement: the restaurant industry and the Pullman Train Company. And so both of these industries employed mostly recently freed slaves and argued that they should be able to withhold wages and instead have this workforce rely exclusively on customer tips to survive. And so the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters formed as the first black union in the United States and fought and won the right to a wage, which is amazing part of labor history, but unfortunately restaurant workers did not. And so in the past 80 years, restaurant workers, tipped workers, have seen their wages go from $0 an hour to $2.13 an hour. And so the tipped minimum wage has been $2.13 an hour since 1991. And this is partially because, or largely because, Herman Cain was president of the Restaurant Association in 1996. Are folks familiar with Herman Cain? Okay. So Herman Cain was president of the Restaurant Association, and as president of the Restaurant Association, he struck a deal with Congress that the Restaurant Association would not oppose an increase to the overall minimum wage as long as the tipped minimum wage remained frozen at $2.13 an hour, which is where it still is today. And this deal continues to be struck every time the minimum wage increase excludes tipped workers. And so it is outrageous that the second largest and fastest growing sector of our economy has working people pay each other rather than having multi-billion-dollar companies pay the people that they employ. And so how do they get away with this? How does the Restaurant Association get away with not paying its workers? They get away with it because they present this image of a tipped worker being a white male in fine dining, earning six figures in tips, or a teenager working over the summer to make a little bit of extra cash. But the reality is, tipped workers in the United States, over 70% of tipped workers are women working in restaurants like IHOP and Olive Garden, whose median wage is $8.90, including tips. Their average age is 31 years old, over 44% of whom have higher education degrees, and 31% of whom are parents. And so as a result, in the restaurant industry with tipped workers, we see tipped workers experiencing poverty at 3 times the rate of the general workforce and relying on food stamps at double the rate. And so just think about that horrible irony for a minute. The people who are putting food on our tables in America cannot afford to put food on their own. And so, I was saying I'm based in Philadelphia, and before coming here, I was talking with one of our members. Our tip minimum wage in Pennsylvania is $2.83, so it's a whopping 70 cents higher than the federal tip minimum wage. And I was talking with one of our members before coming here, and she was telling me that she was making about $30 on an 8-hour shift. And this was because business was slow, and because also management was having her do more and more side work because they didn't want to pay a non-tipped worker to do it while business was slow. And this is not a small business. This is a big chain. This is a chain that I am not afraid to name. It's called Eaton Park. It's a big chain in Western Pennsylvania. And so at Eaton Park, they're shifting work onto tipped workers to save money. And she, as a result, was considering applying for food stamps to feed her own family. And there are too many stories like this, stories of workers who work full-time in the restaurant industry and cannot support themselves, stories of workers who experience sexual harassment as a daily part of the job. I recently filed a sexual harassment complaint for a mother and daughter who work at Hardee's in Tennessee. Hardee's is the part of the chain owned by former Secretary of Labor nominee Andrew Putzer, who's known for objectifying women to sell burgers. And so this mother and daughter worked in the same location and would regularly complain and report the issues of sexual harassment, but their complaints fell on deaf ears because it was the norm in that restaurant as it is in so many restaurants throughout the country. Our industry has the highest rate of sexual harassment complaints to the EEOC. We surveyed over 900 restaurant workers and found that 90% had experienced sexual harassment at work. And it is such a norm in the industry that when workers are harassed by consumers, 63% of them just ignore it, because when your consumers, not your employer, give you the money that pays your bills and puts food on your table, you tolerate how they touch you, talk to you, or treat you, or you risk your income. This is how many young women, including myself, get introduced to the world of work, and that is fundamentally not okay. And so we need to eliminate this archaic two-tiered wage system that has a subgroup of predominantly female workers working for tips. The restaurant industry can and should pay its entire workforce. There are currently 8 states in the United States that have no sub-minimum wage for tipped workers: California, Oregon, Nevada, Washington, Alaska, Minnesota, Montana, and recently Maine. And these states actually have higher restaurant sales per capita, higher rates of industry growth, and some even have higher rates of tipping than non-tipped minimum wage, than states with a tipped minimum wage. And so we are currently working to eliminate the tipped minimum wage. Our campaign is called One Fair Wage. And so this is historic, right? This is historic because for the first time in a century, we're seeing a huge segment of the population say that this industry should pay its workers. And we have seen, so this is a map that kind of maps out the tipped minimum wage. The purple states are states that have no tipped minimum wage. The red states are states with a $2.13 tip minimum wage. And the green, yellow, and blue in between are states that are kind of somewhere in between there. And folks have said that the outline of the red states kind of resembles the Mason-Dixon line, which is interesting just considering the history of tipping. But so we have seen, thankfully, we have seen momentum towards one fair wage. Recently, in November, Maine became the first state on the East Coast to eliminate the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers. We're actively moving campaigns through our offices in New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, DC, Michigan, and also Boston. In Boston, we're working with Raise Up Massachusetts to fight for $15 for all workers, including an elimination of the sub-minimum tipped wage, paid family medical leave, and a fair share amendment that would require millionaires to pay their fair share of taxes. And so I think, you know, as we see this momentum, we are in a moment within rock and but beyond rock, right? In history, we are in a moment of both social upheaval and rising expectations. We see people saying we don't want $10 an hour because it's feasible, we want 15 because we need and deserve that. We don't want a revised Muslim ban, we want no ban at all. We don't want to preserve DACA, we want a real pathway to citizenship. And we don't want to raise the tip minimum wage, we want to abolish it. And so I think the question for all of us today at this conference is, how do we rise? How do we use this moment of rising expectations as a food justice movement, as organizers, as workers, as immigrants, as advocates, as lawyers, as students, as foodies? How do we use this moment? And so at ROC, one way we are using this moment to rise and to resist the racist, xenophobic, anti-worker, anti-poor policies of this current administration is through our Sanctuary Restaurant Project. And through the Sanctuary Restaurant Project, we're working to create safer spaces within the restaurant industry for all people. And so what we're saying through this project is that we want spaces where we can be temporarily, we can have a temporary taste of reprieve and protection so that we have the strength to go back out into the world and continue to fight for our existence. Spaces where we can say that the oppression that is seemingly filling our lives will not happen here. And so, within the Sanctuary Restaurant Project, this is a direct response to the Trump administration's efforts and rhetorics. The project was actually formed by our RAISE, our high road employers. Every month, the RAISE employers get together by phone and have a conference call where they talk about concerns and ideas. And so in the December call after the election, they were sharing concerns over the safety and well-being of their workers, as well as the potential for massive labor shortages in the industry if the Trump administration did in fact carry through with its plan of massive deportations and immigration enforcement. And so these employers came together, and instead of being paralyzed by fear or silenced, they used their power and strength as an industry to write a letter to the current administration asking for a pathway to citizenship. And so we at ROC were really inspired by this, and so we decided to broaden the scope of this project and make it part of our ongoing work, because virtually every population that is under attack by the current administration is employed in large numbers in our industry. We are one of the largest employers of immigrants, with a third of all undocumented workers working in the service industry. We are one of the largest employers of Muslim, LGBTQ, Black, working class, poor, and female workers. And also, due to the abysmally low wages and lack of benefits, about a quarter of our industry relies on ACA or Medicaid and now stands to lose access to health care. And so we use an expanded definition of sanctuary because of the diversity within our industry, but also because of the intersecting and interconnected forms of oppression that affect our base. And so currently with the Sanctuary Restaurant Project, we have over 400 restaurants signed up, hundreds of workers and thousands of consumers through this project alone. And what we're providing for these workers, employers, and consumers is we're providing informational and educational training. We're training employers on their rights and obligations when dealing with immigration, wage and hour law, anti-discrimination law, and providing model policies that they can implement in the workplace that are kind of supportive of their workers. With workers, we're training them on their rights in relation to wage and hour, anti-discrimination, immigration, and also organizing. And then with consumers, we're starting bystander intervention and de-escalation trainings. And in addition to this educational approach, we also have a rapid response support system through which we're providing community, legal, emotional, and communications support to people in the industry who face discrimination, harassment, hate crimes, or immigration enforcement. Oops, not yet. And so this is a scary time, right? It's horrible that we have to have precautions like this in this industry and for our worker members. This is definitely a scary time for people of color and working class people, but it is not the first scary time. Our communities have faced similar problems before the election and resisted. And so we also are in a moment of undeniable hope and power. You know, a few weeks ago, on Day Without a Woman, we saw women walk out of work demanding respect. On a Day Without an Immigrant, we saw entire business districts and towns being shut down. We saw bodega workers go on strike to protest the Muslim ban, and taxi workers to go on strike in solidarity with airport protesters. And even at ROC, 2 weeks ago, our worker leadership, we had a national leadership convening in DC, and our workers voted to call for an industry-wide strike on May Day, International Workers' Day, because they can shut down the second largest industry in this country if they need to. And so we have never seen this many people on the streets and taking action as we have right now. And the question is, how do we turn this moment into a movement? How do we push as far as we can for justice and not settle for subpar compromises? How do we settle for nothing less than justice for ourselves and our communities? As a food justice movement, we need to unite and demand an end to corporate control of our food system, poverty, wages, and environmental degradation. We need to commit to fighting for a world where everyone has a livable wage, a healthy and safe place to live and work, and can control what they put into their bodies. And we can only do this together. We at ROC are overjoyed at being part of this movement with you all, and I'm personally honored to be here to collaborate and think about ways we can create justice all along the food chain. And so our asks to you today, organizations, please If you're here, if you're a member of an organization, please consider signing on to our One Fair Wage campaign. Lawyers in the room, join our National Legal Referral Network to support workers who are having a violation of their legal rights. Massachusetts residents, my colleague Jamila is right here. Please sign up with Rock Boston to learn how you could support the local campaign right here in your area. And also join the April 4th action at the Boston Commons so April 4th is the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And so on April 4th, Rock Boston and Raise Up Massachusetts will be demanding that the city of Boston recognizes the ongoing struggles of people of color in this city by demanding $15 for all and elimination of the tip minimum wage as a legacy of slavery. And everybody who eats food, please join our sanctuary restaurant movement. You can do this right now. We'll make an exception for phones, but you can take out your phone and text the word table to TABLE to 225568. And that will prompt you to join the Sanctuary Restaurant Movement. So you will get alerts and be able to join our consumer movement, which is called Diners United. And then also, I think most importantly for everyone here, please consider food workers' rights as a part of sustainability. We cannot have a sustainable food system without sustainable wages for the people who grow, transport, make, and serve that food. And so we have all of our reports and research online. Some of it is with us today. So please get familiar with these issues and make it part of your ongoing work about how you talk about food justice. But more importantly, talk to people when you go out to eat. Talk to your servers, talk to your bartenders, talk to your management. The same way you would talk about food sourcing, talk about working conditions. And connect with each other at this conference and beyond to learn and strategize about how together we can build a strong, cohesive, interconnected food justice movement, because we can win, but we can only win if we are in this together. Thank you. So I can take questions if there are any. Unless I explained everything. Yeah, there are some union hotels through Unite here. And so the majority of restaurants not associated with unions, our industry is 0.01% union. And then many hotels are also not union, so it depends on the hotel.
All right, microphone. I had a question actually about the payroll cards that you talked about, because I feel like there could be an opportunity there too, because things are tracked. So I don't know if there's, maybe there's some opportunities if they could be done well. So I'd love to hear a little bit more, because I know in other industries as well, there's movement to them. And part of it's as a way to make it easier for the cash to show up in people's bank account and not have to go to payday lenders and that kind of thing.
Definitely. I think there is a lot of potential for payroll cards to be great, especially for workers who don't have bank accounts. And so we've worked on legislation in various cities to create legislation that allows payroll cards to exist, but that also take care of the workers. So the issues with payroll cards that we see for workers include the excessive fees, but also the lack of choice. So some companies will issue a payroll card and not really give workers the opportunity, or at least a fair opportunity, to get off of the card. They'll kind of hand the card to the worker and say, well, this is how we do it here. And workers will not be able to access those wages without fee deductions. And so I think in some situations, what we're doing on a statewide level is looking for payroll card policy that allows access to the wages without fees, but also an employee choice, right? So workers can choose if they want cash, check, or payroll card. We do, yes. So we have academic partners on the majority of our research, but we also have a research department within ROC. And so our research methodology, I'm not the best person to speak to it, but we do extensive worker surveying. And then we also use a whole breadth of government data through the Bureau of Labor Statistics and kind of deep research methodology. And so usually we survey, thousands of restaurant workers and then do really in-depth interviews as well. So, for example, in Philadelphia, I think we surveyed 1,000 workers and then did about 50 really in-depth interviews with workers and employers, as well as focus groups. And so Jamila has the Rock Boston research report that I think also includes an overview of the methodology that was used.
I'm curious about how you work with employers when you're working on labor rights issues. How did you form that group of employers to come together? Was there conflicts of interest or tension there?
There hasn't been too much tension, right? Because the employers we're working with are high-road employers who are looking to implement proactive pro-worker policies. So there's not much overlap between our high road and then the low road. To the extent that there ever is or would be a conflict, our default as an organization is to always support workers first and foremost. And so the reason that works formed was as we were, it's really important to have an alternative because we, as an organization, almost all of us at ROC have worked or currently work in the restaurant industry. We want this industry to be successful. And so it's really important to us that we show the alternative, we show that it's possible. And so that's why we have our employer association, that's why we have our own restaurants, and that's why we provide the job training to show that there is an alternative to this low road, and we know that it's possible, and so therefore the restaurant industry can do better.
Y quería preguntar acerca de los trabajadores de restaurante también no tienen tiempo extra así pasando las 40 horas.
My question is, I wanted to ask about the employees in the restaurants. I would like to know if they have the right to
Si no tienen tiempo extra después de las 40 horas.
overtime. So if they have overtime after 40 hours.
So in our workplace organizing campaigns, we don't differentiate our demands by immigration status. So we will ask the company across the board for the full wages and overtime for all of the workers. And so we use a combination, because we use a combination of legal and organizing, right? We put forward what people are owed regardless, right, of immigration status. And so our campaigns are very much hybrids for many reasons, and often we'll ask for structural change. And we settle almost always, if not always, out of court. And so we have very flexible settlement arrangements. So yeah, like our campaigns have included not only immigrant workers, but undocumented workers, and we ask for the same treatment for all. It's going well. So Danny Myers has moved to a no tipping model, like model of hospitality, where tips are like the rate of tipping would be included. So everyone on staff is paid a livable wage, and so I saw him or his staff this week in DC, and they said if it's been going great, they haven't gotten any complaints from customers, and they really did a lot of prep with workers, right, about why. So their staff was on board. They were slightly concerned that customers would be concerned about increases in the price, but he said that no one even mentioned it. It was a nominal increase, and that also prices go up for no reason as well, so, or for profit anyway. So he said that they hadn't had much, or if any, negative feedback on it, which is great because that's another model that we look at.
Can you speak to the issue of sexual harassment and kind of if you found that either working directly with workers to with how to engage with that or working with the employers is more productive? Do you feel like the tipped wage is really getting rid of that is really the vital part of that, or what are the other angles that you're working?
Yeah, definitely eliminating the tip minimum wage is a huge part of that because workers feel that they have to tolerate how customers treat them or they lose income. And so that is a huge, huge piece of it. We also do, we have a model sexual harassment policy that we share with employers and train them on how to implement. And we do know your rights trainings for workers about their rights. When we do know your rights trainings for workers on this issue, we're often, the response is like, yeah, I know that's illegal, but what am I gonna do? Because if I say something, like I'm not gonna get that table, or I'm not gonna get a tip, or I'm not gonna get a good shift. And so It is extremely important that workers know their rights. On this issue specifically, we feel it's really necessary to eliminate the structure that forces workers to rely exclusively on their customers. And also, often, even with training management on a model policy, management's is not always aware of what's happening between each server and their table. And so it's not like management can hold if they hear about it after the fact, they can't really intervene. It is helpful if there's harassment within the workplace amongst management and staff, but with consumers, it's of limited success. So it's really eliminating the tipped wage is what needs to happen, but we have these incremental steps to get there.
I just want to give a shout out to Rob. Your work, the research you did, interviewing thousands of parties and Carl's Jr. workers, your advocacy is the reason Andrew Costa is only Secretary of Labor. And more importantly, it's the reason that Carl's Jr. has just withdrawn all their objectifying ads that were just horrible. So I did, for those of you who didn't know, they did an incredible survey of parties workers and Carl's Jr. workers that showed sort of rampant wage theft. A lot of the workers on Medicaid because they can, there's not a living wage, and sexual harassment. They had a wonderful hearing that your great senator here, Senator Elizabeth Warren, did, sort of a mock hearing because the Democrats can't call a hearing, and Rob brought in 3 witnesses, and also that led to the discovery of this tape that then sort of got out about. But you really did an incredible job. So
Thank you. Thank you. One more.
I'm just wondering, as a consumer, how can we know that the restaurants we go to are paying fair wages or have any practices about?
Definitely. So we have a diner's guide. It's an app, and it's also available on our website. It's called the Diner's Guide, and so it rates the highest grossing restaurants, as well as local restaurants based on how they treat their workers. So in Boston, I know, for example, Banh Mi is a great employer, as is Julian in Somerville. But if you go onto our app, it shows you who are high road employers. But I think also, it's not like we're trying to say where to eat and where not to eat. Wherever you choose to eat, consider the workers who are working there. Definitely. I think we see our work at ROC as being ongoing, right? So we're not going to go away when the tip minimum. We want to restructure the wage system within the restaurant industry, but that alone is not justice, right? Like, we will continue to organize workers, and we believe that real justice and a fair economic system is one in which workers are empowered and have everything they need to live their lives. And so until that happens, we will continue to organize. And I think what that is a fundamental restructuring of this country and who controls this country, whether it's the corporations or the people. And I think we at ROC believe it should be the people. Thank you.
Okay, folks, we're about to release everyone to the break. You're going to have about 15 minutes. It looks like we got ourselves back on time. So the time in your pamphlet should still be accurate. I wanted to point out a few things like the locations of the bathrooms and water fountains. The bathrooms are downstairs. You could access the elevator or the staircase that direction. There are 2 water fountains in the building, one which is a traditional mouth water fountain upstairs here. It's like on this level. And the second one is a water bottle refill station directly downstairs by the men's restroom. Also, the panels, all 3 panels and any breakout session today will all be on this level. There's 3 rooms. There's one that direction, there's this one, and one that direction. So you shouldn't have to go up or downstairs to get to any of the panel or other breakout sessions. Last but not least, please take this moment during the 15-minute session to take a look at the posters and exhibit tables that we have in the hallway. Any of the bios for our speakers or exhibit table and poster presenters can be found online. So thank you all and enjoy your break.